So on Facebook, when you were talking about your tooth,
Yeah.
you transitioned into a story about clenching your jaw a lot out of like tension and anger and anxiety.
Correct.
So have you found that, like, because you focus on a lot of stuff. You're looking at climate change, elections, politics, inclusivity, education. How do you like focus on so much stuff without it taking a physical or mental toll, or does it?
Well, I mean, I feel like I have a general like sarcastic way of dealing with it. I think, half the time I'm like, burn it all down. I wonder, like, if I'm entrenched as I should be sometimes, or do I have this policy or this method in my brain that is so self-soothing, right? That it's like, it'll be okay, Nicole, it'll be okay. And then I have so every time I think of something negative, I have a really good way of digging for something positive. And there's just, I think, something, and it's not great to be an optimist because you're constantly disappointed because you're always wrong. Like, I recognize that optimism is not the way, but it's just like sort of how my brain works. And so I feel like it's sort of the same way that I think that I imagine I do juggle multiple ideas at the same time too, is because there is that attempt for self-soothing and that attempt to always look for the bright side. And so I'm pushing from one idea to the next, trying to make it better, try to make it better, try to make it better, which I think is its own sort of pathology, right? But on the other hand, what do I care? Like, as pathological as that might be, how else is anyone going to get through these dark times? I mean, I was reading last night about the kelp forest in the Pacific Ocean, and it's just gone. It's 90% gone, and it's because of the sea urchin. Well, there's two reasons. One, there was this huge warm patch that came, or weather system that came through the Pacific Ocean, killed a good portion of the kelp. So then the sea urchin took advantage of this weakened kelp forest, and they started eating them. Now there's way too many sea urchins, and there's not enough sea stars that eat the sea urchins, and there's not enough otters that eat the sea urchins. And without the sea kelp, the otters will die. But not only that, the urchins themselves will die because they eat kelp. And so it's this crazy, like, I mean, it seemed last night impossible. But then, right after I read that, I was reading about the election results, right? And Kentucky has a new governor, and it's a Democrat, and so I easily let myself slip into positive land. And I mean, I don't know I don't know if that is, naive, blind, Pollyanna-ish, or if it's just like if I'm just saving myself, like, well, I just can't spend my whole life being depressed, and nobody can, right? On the other hand, does it lead to inactivism is my real concern. I don't care how pathological it is, but if I'm too self-satisfied or too easily talked out of those being solutions, then I get a little distraught. Like, what am I just making myself feel better? Because you have to feel really crappy to actually do something about anything, right?
Yes. So some people would say, Nicole, why are you looking up these articles about kelp dying? You're just pumping yourself out. You could just avoid the articles and you'd be okay. What would you say to those people?
Well, they obviously don't spend enough
time to look at those articles.
Ah, that's so interesting. I never thought of that as an option. I mean, I'm sure part of it is just the fact that I'm always doing research about something, and so I'm Googling and things just come up, and it seems sort of interesting, and I'm like, what? Like, phrases like 90% of the kelp forest is dead to me are wild enough and dramatic enough to make me click. But yeah, it would be nice if I had better and happier interests. But
so are you coming across this stuff as part of your research, or is it coming through your like Facebook news feed?
It does both. I mean, it does both because I do the research and then it comes through my Facebook feed because the algorithm people have me. And I like to.
She loves super depressing environmental articles. Send right to her.
And think of this, like, this is the other way that I, like you started the conversation, like you're juggling all these ideas and you have like, you're talking about education and climate change and kids and politics all at once. And how do you, how do you keep all those balls from just like feeling crazy? And they do probably feel and seem crazy. But I also feel we're getting more and more attuned to that kind of thinking. Like when I scroll through Facebook and I see like super, super sad kelp forest dying, and then 2 seconds later is a meme about like, Donald Trump dressed like a pig, you're like, ha ha ha. Oh, that's really sad. Ha ha ha. That's really sad. Like we're all, I think, becoming a little bit more psychotic, just by the way that we are asked to deal with these vicissitudes of emotion. But well, I kind of think it's fun anyway, even if it's it doesn't seem that healthy, but it does a good job of being a simulacrum of having a life.
Is it ease? Is it just a natural inclination for you, or are you purposely thinking, how can I pile up different topics that are somehow still have connective tissue?
I think for me the easiest way to write is the braided essay, because I feel like one completes a thought, and then it takes a while for another thought in the same vein. And so if you switch veins, you move out of that first mode and move into your second mode, and there's a new thought. And then that second thought refers back to that first thought, and you have a third thought. And so to me, it's like, because there, and it's I think a lot because I feel like I trained as a poet, that maybe in my deepest sense I am a poet, that metaphor is what writing is to me. And so to have this one idea threading through over here and this other idea, and then they start to feather together, to me is easy in a way, right? Like by ease I mean productive. Things come out of it. And transitions too then are, because I love it, right? Because I feel like if you like something, it makes it easier too. And I've just been practicing for a long time, so I have this like, I can leave a word at the end of the first paragraph and move and repeat that word even though it's a different topic in that second paragraph, and there's this kind of cohesive, or like you said, connective tissue that happens just through the language itself. But I do think that transitions, I also think that we don't have as much need for transitions as maybe we once did in writing, because we're really good at watching movies that have jump cuts. We're really, like I was saying about Facebook, we're really good at just flipping and flipping. And so I think I do rely on my reader a lot to help me make that connective tissue. And I think it can be frustrating. I just saw that. So when I was in Ohio, it looks like one of the professors taught my book to fresh people. And I was like, oh man, I am sorry, fresh people. But they were very, very receptive. And I mean, some of them are like, this woman's nuts. But some of them are like, there's only one way you can think about these things. Because there's because there's so much going on that you have to sort of recycle through them, right? And I like this idea of my own text being like recycled themselves. Like each paragraph is kind of just recycling another. And that's another way to think about the transitions, how the transitions work. And so I feel like they come naturally after now years of practicing how to make them come natural.
So that wasn't a style that you started with. You kind of worked your way into that.
Yes, I think that, so my first book, Quench Your Thirst with Salt, was about, it was first called Water and Wine. And just that idea, right off the bat, like I would have half of the book was going to be about water, or half of the essay would be about water, the other would be about wine. And it transformed from that sort of narrow idea to something more expansive. But to me, again, just like because of that belief that metaphor is the way to see, I think it became something that I cultivated in my style.
Mm-hmm. And it does seem, although like I guess now it's dated, the idea of flicking channels and remotes.
Yeah.
But now I guess it's clicks and flicking between different tabs.
Exactly. And I think the essay itself, Montaigne's essays do a lot of that flicking too. It's not like I'm like new to this, but things like the novel are, imagined to be a little bit more linear and a little bit more chronological and forward moving, and that there's something about the essay that allows that flicking, or imagines that the reader is interested in the flicking or doing some of the work that makes the flicking work go together. That'd be interesting to imagine, like, is the essay more cinematic in style than the novel, just because there's these gifts of jump cuts that that the audience's brain is going to fill in.
Yeah. Can you think of any novels that use that style? I don't know.
I think Jennifer.
There are styles like David Foster Wallace's. Infinite Jest is a bit all over the place.
Yeah, Jennifer Egan does it to some degree. I think Cloud Atlas works sort of like that, but it's not, and there's a lot of books that flip between points of view every chapter.
Episodic then.
Yeah, and I love that, but there's a connection. There's a from the beginning. There's a sense of how these things connect. Whereas I think sometimes the essay is like, hold on, we'll get to it. We'll get there eventually.
So if you saw someone in a bookstore and they're holding your book, this book here, and they're like confused, they don't know what it is, what would you tell this person this book is about?
So what I would say about this book is, hey, there's a lot of books about climate change that'll tell you what the hell's going on, that'll tell you what's wrong, what we're doing wrong, that there's no hope, or that there is hope, or that these are the steps you can make the change. And this book is none of those things, because those books, exist, and people, are better trained and better situated to write about those kind of things. But what David and I really wanted to do was to write a book that wasn't entirely depressing.
Mm-hmm. There was a child back there.
Hi, Max. That wasn't, and not only not depressing, but that took sort of that sense of optimism and attempt toward balance, and said, if we only write about how horrible everything is and how everything's dying, only people who are depressed all the time are going to want to read this. People who are not interested in reading articles about 90% of the kelp forest dying are going to avoid this situation. It's too grim and it's too big to try to tackle. So what I would say to these people in a shorter version is, this book is about how there's so many beautiful things on this planet that we can know about and get to know about, and some of them are extremely interesting because we're watching climate change happen, but by paying attention to those extreme moments, that the quotidian or more regular parts of our day become even more precious. And so it makes those the regularness of our lives even more special and lovely.
So you seem to enjoy small packages. So you work in micro essays. You had the other collection before this of nonfiction essays were about eggs, which are tiny. Some of them are big, but even when they're big, they're kind of tiny. So what draws you to smaller things?
I think a lot of that, there's two. I'm going to take that question from two directions. One is that I feel like, truly, in my most Pollyanna-ish ways and most optimistic ways, I feel like by paying attention to the small things, the little things of the world, that we can accumulate enough care to care about the big things. So paying attention to all the little things going around you all the time, from the microorganisms to the brine shrimp to little things like eggs, to the way you open a door, to the way the texture of your walls, to the different colors on the rocks that line your fireplace. Just paying attention to those things, I feel like that care and concern translates and accumulates into something major and important. And if everybody's doing that and accounting for the tiny things around them, that the correlates to the second point, that becomes this big movement. In fact, maybe something almost like a paradigm shift. Somebody was reading my book the other day and was like, this was in, I think it was in North Carolina, and asked their professor after they'd read some of sustainability, said, do you think about all these things? And the dude was like, no. It's like, no, but that's wrong. You guys need to worry about all this shit all the time. But not worry, I mean, worry is part of it, but also just thinking about all that stuff all the time, because it, to me, is the way of giving things the weight that they deserve, even though they're not the human thing. Mm-hmm. And then the other way of thinking about the small is, sort of in this microcosm, more metaphorical kind of way, that you can't comprehend the entire planet at once. You can't comprehend all of climate change at once. You can't comprehend all of weather at once. The number of people on the planet, the amount of water that people drink every day and use every day, like all of those numbers become unimaginable. So something that, like with the After Normal, using the abecedarian form, it's like, okay, we get that you're not going to get everything, but let's take one letter at a time and imagine how this is emblematic of the whole. And so to me, that emblem sense is really important as well. Like, here's a little drop of the big picture. Here's a little drop of the big picture. And then you get enough little drops in a row, especially from all kinds of different angles, that leads to some sort of prismatic understanding.
Okay. Have you ever felt yourself drawn to doing some giant opus of a piece?
I try, I have this novel that's out with my agent that is, novels are different, and I love them, even though I still feel that they are mainly accumulations of small details. I do feel you have to have that big narrative trajectory and this sort of this belief that all of those little pieces, instead of adding up to something metaphorical, add up to a whole within the book itself. And so working in fiction, I think, is one of those ways where the universe is encapsulated in one text, and that makes me really happy. I'm writing my new nonfiction project's called The Escape Song, based on the Pina Colada song. Yeah, everybody get it in your head.
Saw you're writing a collection based on this?
Correct.
I thought that was like one of those weird, somebody forced me to do this post on Facebook and answer this question kind of thing. I didn't think it was a whole.
It's mostly that. It's otherwise it's more serious than that. But the question is, if there are two places that you can't really escape, and one of them is your own head, and the other one is the planet. And that sense of being sort of trapped with yourself and trapped on the planet is sort of how I'm going to take this next exploration into, how one tries to flee one situation, or the fight or flight response or freeze response, and how that does make it more difficult to make climate change choices, because we are so used to just, when something's scary, we just run away, right? And that sense of learning how to fight in a system that says, oh, it's just easier to just do nothing, is I guess the larger underpinning of the book.
Okay, so as part of that, some people are like talking about, let's go build a colony on Mars, and then some people are like, you have to do so much work on Mars just to make it livable. Why not do half of that work here and just continue staying here?
Exactly. Like the ridiculousness of like, yeah, this planet's done. It's like it's less done than non-planets. Like, I don't know. Yeah, people. There's that dream, right, of escape, and that song is so funny because it's how it is. Now the guy sings his or he reads a classified ad, and so he responds to a classified ad, and then he finds out later that it's his own lovely lady that had written the first ad, and that that to me is exactly sort of where we are in our understanding of of climate change and our planet and each other. Is you just have to see the other person in this new light, and then you're like, oh, this is going to be fine. But how do you push people to that extreme, new perspective? Is, I guess through the classified ads, which we don't even have anymore.
So one of the essays, Catastrophe, talks about how even the word catastrophe has some good in it.
Yeah.
So what good have you seen coming out of the 2016 election?
Oh, well, I love the darkness, as you know. And what I think has happened, I mean, I think if Hillary had I think horrible things have happened. I mean, there are kids that have died in custody after being separated at the border. Parents are being separated from the children at the border. There are people in the Kurds in Syria and Turkey have been slaughtered. Like the actual number of people that have died on Donald Trump's watch, the way people are being targeted and harassed as being because they're transgendered or because they are, Jewish. I mean, okay. Anyway, there's a lot of bad. So I'm not saying that the good outweighs the bad, but the good to me.
There was some, yeah.
Yeah, there is this new. I feel like this resurgence of concern about things like climate change. If Hillary had been president, I think we would have, gone along with the Paris Accord. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah. And we would have, kept making these incremental steps. But I think as Trump goes in and says let's start logging in Tongass National Forest, and let's drill in the Bears Ear National Monument, and let's just let that Keystone Pipeline spew oil whichever direction it goes. I feel like that sort of extremism is then met with more extreme resistance, and the extreme resistance is probably what we need. And I mean, for climate change, I mean, I think for other elements like he is entirely bad, but in terms of climate, he, by pushing things this ridiculous direction where actual pollutants in the air have gone up after 50 years of declining, right? Like actual PM, the particulate matter 2.5s have been getting worse. That in the past 3 years, that to me, that's the kind of thing that's going to make a greater percentage of the people wake up and be like, oh, this is a big deal. Whereas with Obama, it was it wasn't ever a big, it wasn't a huge agenda item, and it wasn't a crisis. And now people are talking about it being a climate crisis. The 11,000 scientists came together and said it's an emergency now. And I don't know if that would have happened under Hillary. So that makes me, that's the only bright side I see. But that unity and solidarity together of people that are just like, fuck you, motherfucker. Sorry, I don't know if that's allowed on our Skype call. But just that you can delete that part and say, I'll say this instead. To say, the resistance is I think unified and solid, and we have new power in ways I don't think we would have if we hadn't been pushed to be.
So it added urgency.
I feel so, yeah. Urgency and anger and energy, yeah.
And motivation.
Yeah.
So in Loophole,
yeah,
you talk about escaping to Sweden or Norway or Denmark. Is that still in the books?
Well, I mean, no, I think the whole idea behind that is that it's a dream in a way, right? That you always have to have an escape hatch or a thing where you think, oh, if I could just get out, it would be fine. And I don't think it's at least my greatest gift is thinking, well, I'll just go. When I get mad at my university, I'm just like, fine, I'm going to quit. Or I get mad at my husband, I'm like, that's it, we're out. And it's like that sense of wanting to go. It makes, it's clear to me why you would want to do that, because people are irritating and universities are irritating and countries are irritating. But I don't actually think it's the right move. I think, I fundamentally feel like one should stay and fight. And I'm in Arizona, and but it's been interesting.
Yeah.
I've been here for 11 years now, and it's changing a little tiny bit. Every day you feel like, all right, they say it's going purple. Is it? Oh, it's changing. And I'm from Utah, and even Utah, is changing a tiny bit. So I wouldn't go. I don't think. I don't think I would leave the country, even though I think there are places that have it more together.
So you're gonna stick around while the house burns down around you.
Exactly. I want to at least want to inhale the smoke, if not feel the actual flames.
So you talk about normally you talk about your children and how and partly you're hanging your hopes for the future partly on them solving some of the problems that maybe your generation or my generation aren't able to solve.
Right.
Do you ever get nervous talking about?
I feel like I can sense that I write about my kids less the older they get. So there's something about them having more autonomy, right? And being less connected to me, as they grow and develop their own lives. There are parts where I feel okay about borrowing from, and parts that I wouldn't trouble my kid to talk about, like her teeth problems or whatever, in the same way that I used to talk about her lung problems. She had asthma for a long time. She was a preemie, but that was, again, sort of, it felt like that an extension of me for a long time. But now that she's a full-on human, it's more difficult to write about her, or that it's something I feel like I would run past her in ways that I run past most of the stuff I write about my husband by him, which he feels like he's like, oh my God. And he just rolls his eyes and says, don't you have anything more interesting to write about? I'm the most interesting thing in your life. And sustainability, I think, that was a pretty risky book in a way. And I don't think it was, not everybody. I mean, unless you've been in a relationship for 475 years, like me and Eric, you sort of take the grimness, with a grain of salt. And I think a lot of relationships never are willing to, a lot of people aren't willing to showcase the kind of icky parts of their relationship. And I think it's better to do so. And it's not the end of the world, right? And how do you get past that? Because if there's one thing I think we're all really bad at, is confronting icky situations, including moments in relationships where things aren't going that well that week. And also it leads to our resistance and inability to deal with things we don't like climate change. Maybe you're going to have to make some changes. Maybe we're going to have some difficult conversations about, what you can't do. And people hate being told what not to do. They don't like to air their feelings. And so part of the process or project behind sustainability was to say, look, I'm willing to air this crap in the vein of saying this, it's all really hard and none of this is easy. And the struggle's real, man. But it's worth it, in the end. Yeah.
So the after normal is not really, you already touched on this a bit. It's not prescriptive. It's not telling people what to do or how to experience what they're experiencing now.
Yeah.
But I don't know was that intentional from the get-go, that you guys were going to talk more about how do you keep pushing through these uncomfortable, terrible experiences and still see somewhat potentially a light at the end? Or did you start off thinking, okay, we're going to tell people, give them a survival guide? And I feel like it did discuss slightly as the survival guide at the beginning, but it never really tells you how to survive this shit.
Exactly. Well,
so I discover as you were writing it, the only way to survive this is just experiencing, reflecting, and hoping.
And I think those three things, and doing it with somebody else. So I think the form of the book is sort of the survival guide part of it, which is this shit's a lot easier to deal with if you have somebody on the other end willing to talk to and think about and worry over it with. we use this book, Donna Haraway's Staying with the Trouble, as sort of our guide, and this idea of we can't necessarily fix it immediately. I mean, we can think of ways of fixing it, we can support ways of fixing it, but we, individuals, are probably not going to fix it. But we also aren't going to just lie at it, right? Just glide over it and pretend it doesn't happen. But maybe if we just sit with it for a while, and we sit with it and sit with it, and we recognize that this stuff is going down, but we also sit with it with each other. And that, to me, is what the book finally, how it ends up being a guide of some sort, is that you have somebody on the other side that you can send your missives to and say, look at what I found out about the word catastrophe. Look what I found out about the word loophole. And David emailing or writing about plasmodia and saying, look what I found out about slime molds. And that joy in sharing the excitement and the revelation and the stuff of the world, to me, that's the real, that's the path forward, is like, let's locking arms and saying, let's look at plasmodia, slime molds for everyone. And, just digging, hanging out, looking at slime molds. Man, we could stay out of a lot of trouble if we would just hang out with slime molds.
It was just getting in the dirt, getting in the mud together.
Exactly.
What do you think are the new trends or new issues that MFA programs need to address or are dealing with now versus maybe when you first started the MFA program?
That's so interesting, because it was so great to start the MFA program, because that's what students wanted. That's what most creative writers want. Then you move into, finding yourself in a community that needs a lot more from the program than an MA. So in the MFA program, we really are striving to have more diversity in faculty as well as students. And then, of course, the other hard thing is gearing people up for the lack of employment and making it, kind of clear that this is not a trajectory to a job right off the bat, but that it's a stepstone to an imaginative career, and you have to imagine that career. I don't feel like the MFA anywhere is a guarantee to an academic job, and even the PhD is not, But so what I try to tell students is, this is 2 years where you will have the gift of writing time and people responding to your work, and a writing community and a cohort that will be with you the rest of your life. And there's a good chance, if you keep with it and you keep practicing and you keep publishing, you will get one of those jobs. And they're hard to come by, but they do exist. But it's also to say, these are 2 years you deserve for yourself, and out of them will come all kinds of jobs. Not just that one track is no longer a guarantee, but it's the track to imagine careers that are as fulfilling as writing full time, which is not something no one gets to do, but all of us dream for. Although I tried to write like for 3 days in a row with no interruptions. I was like, this is weird. I need some interruptions. Please come interrupt me.
Awesome.
Sure.
So have you noticed in your current students more of a, because I feel like in my class there was some people writing about nature and stuff like that, but there wasn't like this, things, we need to do something now kind of exigency in their writing. Do you feel that students are now more woke, I guess? I don't know.
A little, I mean, the grad students for sure, but that's, I think, partly too because we're starting this new climate writing. It's called the Environmental Narrative Certificate. Mm-hmm. And we have a climate science writing class, and then they take a bunch of eco literature classes, and they have to take a environmental science class, and it's a grad level certificate. And I do think one thing about teaching in Flagstaff is that we do draw, I think, on people who are generally interested in environment, or at least place-based situations. And so I think we're a little bit on this trajectory before, not about becoming a program that's all about the Southwest or all about place, but that we do have the certificate that says, you know, we welcome that kind of writing here. And so we definitely have experts in that field that we work, and then students gravitate toward us for that reason.
Very good. I think you mentioned another nonfiction collection. So what are you working on, or what can we expect to see from you soon?
So today I had the whole day, except for, you know, I had 3 student essays to respond to, and then a bajillion emails. But otherwise, I had the whole day to write. So I'm working on this climate fiction novel, and these people are selling their tomatoes, and they're the only real vegetables you can get, and then somebody steals their tomatoes, and it's a horrendous situation. And they move from Phoenix, because Phoenix runs out of water, to New York City, which has too much water, but at least there's like a small community available there. So it's like, I feel Station 11-y, but with tomatoes. There's a lot of good ads in it, like, what are they called when you jingles like McDonald's. To all beef patties, lettuce sauce, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. Or the Folgers song.
So you're working on jingles now.
I'm incorporating jingles, not writing new jingles, because that would tax my creative skills beyond their ability.